the odds are pretty significant that you actually have a lopsided practice, and you probably don't even realize it. But once I uncover this for you, once we talk about it, you're going to see how much more profitable you can be. Let's jump in right now.
This is The Rare Advisor, proud to be a part of the Advisor Advancement Network and home of a business model supercharged by recurring and repeatable events. Your host is Mike Walters, CEO of USA Financial. He is an investment advisor representative of and securities are offered through USA Financial Securities, member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor.
So no doubt you've noticed that the name of this series is The Rare Advisor, which the acronym RARE stands for Recurring and Repeatable Events. Now, if you're running recurring and repeatable events, one of the things that you need to understand is if you're focusing on the RARE concept as it relates to implementing processes in your business. So not talking about recurring revenue, but talking about recurring events so that you can create an autopilot within your practice, an assembly line, if you will, so that you know when you push these buttons and you pull these levers, this is what's going to come out the other end. This is how prospects are processed. This is how they end up in the funnel. This is how we move them through an appointment process. This is how we then engage them as clients of the firm. This is how we then go through the planning and asset gathering process and right on down the line. Now, with all of that being said, it is equally important to make sure that you do not have a lopsided practice. And oftentimes I run into many advisors who have very lopsided practices, and it will cost you. It costs you on your P&L statement, and it also costs you on your balance sheet. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, from a P&L standpoint, you are leaving money on the table. You are not operating the business effectively and efficiently so that you can truly manage all of the assets if you are running a lopsided practice, if you do not have balance between your recurring transactions or your recurring revenue and your recurring assets versus your transactional or commissionable or upfront compensated vehicles. So you probably know that the kind of the standard starting point is, from a valuation perspective, your practice, if you're trying to value it based on revenue, would be a 2.5 times multiple on recurring revenue. So that's your assets under management and your fee revenue. That's recurring fee revenue, not planning fee revenue. And then on the transactional side or the commissionable side, it would be a 1 times multiple. So the recurring versus then transactional, or the AUM versus the commissionable, you want to think of kind of bookends in terms of what keeps you from being lopsided. In other words, I don't want to be 100% one way or the other way. And that's what catches a lot of people off guard. They just assume because there's a higher multiple valuation factor on recurring revenue that they want to be 100% recurring revenue. And I will argue with you 2 things. Number one, that lopsidedness will cost you. And not only will it cost you because you're missing some upfront commissionable opportunities, which tend to pay higher. We'll get to that in a moment, but kind of an obvious statement. But also, you're missing on additional assets under management that you could have collected if you were properly using commissionable products to stage for the gathering of the assets under management. So that's a lot to unpack. First, let's talk about the bookends. I would say a bookend for you to consider is like 80-20 on the recurring to commissionable side. So 80% recurring, 20% commissionable. Swinging the other direction to 40% recurring, 60% commissionable. Now, those are some wide bookends, and many people are going to be, in that 50 to 70% range on recurring, and therefore 30 to 50% on non-recurring or commissionable or transactional. But you need to understand that when you're working your way into the asset under management side of the business, obviously it's going to be skewed more heavily because dollar for dollar, it will weigh quicker on the commissionable side. And the longer you're in the business, you will build a mountain because every year you're adding more and more assets under management, and the pile just keeps getting bigger. The mountain is getting bigger. But on the commissionable side, it's more like a mouse on a wheel. I have to keep running to keep it going, and every year I'm starting over from scratch again. So on the one hand, I've got a train running down the tracks, and every year I'm adding another car to it, and my train just keeps getting bigger and longer. That's asset under management. On the other side, I've got a sports car. I fire it up, I put gas in the tank, I step on it, and there I go. As soon as I run out of gas at the beginning of the year, I got to do it all over again. And that's the difference, if you will, mentally speaking. Now, the longer you're doing that, the more it's going to skew towards the assets under management, and the less impact any given commissionable transaction is going to have on your overall revenue, because it's just getting dwarfed, if you will. But that being put aside, I want to talk about the staging process. Commissionable products, most specifically fixed index annuities, is probably the number one category, are great staging vehicles. And what I mean by that is when I'm creating a portfolio, I need, especially for someone who's rapidly approaching retirement or is in retirement, I need to create the portfolio in a way that I can essentially guarantee them income during their retirement. So I'm going to use blocks of time. So I'll have one staging vehicle that's going to cover me for the first 5 years of income. And then I'll have another staging vehicle for the next 5 years. So it's going to be deferred for 5 and then engaged for 5. And then I'll have another one that's going to be deferred for 10 and engaged for 5. So now I'm out to 15 years and right on down the line. So once I stack myself in there with these staging vehicles so that I've got 15 or 20 or 25 years worth of retirement income essentially guaranteed, that frees up time, puts time on my side to go and make those assets under management stand up and sing. And with that kind of time on my side, I know I'm going to get the performance that I need. I just know it, right? Because, the history of the market in and of itself basically proves that for you. So now I can use the staging vehicles to get all the assets under management. If I didn't stage it, if I didn't go through that process I just spoke about, I'm probably not getting all of these assets over here. So when somebody has a practice and they say to me that they are 100% AUM or 100% fee income or 100% recurring revenue, that actually sets off alarms to the fact that they're missing an opportunity. They're missing many opportunities with all of their clients. Now, if you're skewed the other direction and you're 100% commissionable, that's a bigger problem, right? But it's still a problem if I'm skewed the other way. I want to have balance. I want to avoid being lopsided. What I want is balance with a tilt toward recurring. Balance with a tilt toward recurring.
This information is for licensed financial professionals only and is not intended for use in soliciting sales from the public. The views expressed represent the opinions of the presenter or their featured guest, not necessarily those of USA Financial or its affiliated subsidiaries. Industry references are generic and not intended to represent actions or beliefs of any individual or entity. Content is only presented to illustrate general principles, beliefs, or ideas and should not be construed as legal or regulatory advice. Trademark and copyright protected. USA Financial and Affiliates.